All right, so to do the mini me project on Photoshop, the first thing you need to do is get a high quality photo. Go into Google, and I'm just going to look for a Porsche 959. Let me show you a couple of the different tools that you may not actually realize you have access to. The first thing is when you go to Google, I want to click specifically on images up here at the top. The second thing I want to do is I want to click over here on the far right side of Google. There's this button that says tools. If I click on that, it gives me some additional options down here, one of which is size. And what that will do is filter out the results of Google so that I have large photos rather than just thumbnail photos or mid-size photos. There's obviously some other filters here you can use, but I'm going to just filter it out so it's only showing me large. Now, it doesn't look like these are larger, but that's because I need to click on these and open them in a separate tab. Right now, it's just showing me a thumbnail, but I can see down here, this one is actually 27 by 15, which is a pretty full screen size image. That's the size I want. Once I find it, I need to go to right click, open image in new tab, and it's going to open a new tab right here. All right. So here's my full size image. And it's obviously full size. It fills up my whole screen. If you open that up and it's still half the size, choose a new photo. Okay, it just got filtered wrong. So this photo is by itself. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to do save image as. It is important that you do those as two separate steps, opening it first and then saving it. And I'm going to save it here. Inside picture is going to pay attention to where I'm saving it. I'm going to go ahead and rename this to Porsche Large. I'm just going to call it Porsche Large 2 because I've already done this once, and hit save. Now I've done that. The first thing I can do is right down here at the bottom, it's giving me this confirmation message that it downloaded, and I need to check the extension right there after the period. This is a JPEG. I can tell it worked. It's got to be .jpg. You can also do PNGs. Those work. But every once in a while, what will happen is you'll get a JFIF. It'll be JFIF. Those won't work. You'll just need to go find a different image. Okay, so it's the wrong type of image file. So that's my first step, is getting a full-size image. That's important for this project and our next project. Next, I'm going to go open up Photoshop, and I'm simply going to click open, and now go find that photo that I just downloaded. Remember, it's inside pictures, and it's called Porsche Full Size, wherever that is. There it is, Porsche Large. Open that up, and now right away I should be able to tell that it is a full-size image because it will fill my entire screen in just a second. There we go. All right, so this is the full-size image, and now this is where I want to start using my selection tools. If you look up here in the top left corner, you have what's called a lasso tool. And getting used to using these selection tools effectively is going to be the difference between a good-looking photo for our next project and one that looks like it's been cut out with a pair of scissors. So if you open the flyouts, you actually have 3 different types of lasso tools, and these are purely for selecting parts of your photo. You have a regular freehand lasso, you have a polygon lasso, which is like straight lines, and then you have something called a magnetic lasso. So I'm going to start off with the magnetic lasso, and I'm going to actually zoom in on my image here. I like to use Alt and scroll in so I can find it. And I'm going to click, and I'm not clicking my mouse again, but it's doing what's called the magnetic lasso, where it's finding the edges as best as it can. And it really only works if there is a big difference in contrast. So where this is having a hard time is when there are shadows or there's a different size of, or not a difference in color, really. All right. Now, if you look here, it accidentally did a couple of extra nodes. I'm going to hit backspace on my keyboard, and it undoes those little squares that appear that kind of look like anchor points. They're called nodes. So if it goes kind of crazy and starts really highlighting stuff you don't really want, you can kind of modify that as you go here. So I'm just going around, and as I move my mouse, if I want to make sure and lock in sort of a node, I could go ahead and, you can see there's a couple there that I got a little crazy. That's okay. I'm just going along here and not clicking anything. It's just kind of finding these points as I go. Oops. I'm going to backspace here, go along. And the key to this is you have to end where you stop or started. So I take my little mouse pointer and I have that little arrow right on the original starting point. You can see I get a little circle on that icon. As soon as I click this, it turns into a selection. That selection now can be modified. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here. I'm going to switch to my lasso tool. And I'm going to take a look at these tools up here, these ways to modify my selection. I've got one here, which is the selection that you always know. If I were to select somewhere, it would do a new selection and unselect everything else. That's how everyone's used to the way those selection tools work. This selection tool adds to the selection. So if it missed a part, I could add to it. I can subtract from it. And then this last one is for intersection, but we don't really use that much. So for example, I'm going to scroll over here and right up here at the top, it accidentally selected too much, right? So I'm going to zoom in on this part. I'm going to make sure I have the remove from selection tool selected on my lasso. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually kind of select this area. And what it's going to do is remove that selection from my original selection. All right. And then, like, for example, up here, it skipped over this part of the car. So I'm going to go in and choose this, which is add to selection. And just kind of add that to the selection. And add a little bit here. And you just kind of go along your selection here. Like right here, it skipped this part. So I'm going to do add to selection. And if you accidentally do too much, you can just subtract from the selection. So let's say I added, too much right there. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract from that selection. And you move along here and you get your entire thing selected the way you want. So rather than sitting here watching me select, let's just pretend the whole thing is selected. The first thing I'm going to do before I do anything with this is I'm going to go to the select menu and I'm going to choose save selection. So let's say I spent 10 minutes getting this selected perfectly. I don't ever want to have to do that again. So I'm going to save this selection. And I'm just going to call this, car. And that way, if I accidentally, let's say I mess this completely up, or let's say the bell rings and I need to leave, or let's say I accidentally deselect the whole thing and you just spent 10 minutes getting this perfect, you can now just go to select, load selection, and it will pull that selection back up and select exactly what you had. And that saves with your Photoshop file. So tomorrow you could reload that selection if you need to. So now let's pretend I have this selected perfectly. It's not perfect at this point, but let's just pretend it is. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my move tool. I'm going to do a control C, and then I'm going to do a control V. And notice a new layer has been added over here. And you can't tell it, but there's a second version of this car now. All right. Now that second selection is because I highlighted that background exactly. I copied it and it only pasted exactly what I had selected. And then the final step for this project, which is the mini-me project, is to take this particular layer, this selection, and we're going to shrink it down. You do that by going to Edit, Transform, and specifically we're going to do Scale. There's a lot of other cool transformation things you can do, but for scaling, that is just changing the size of it. So I'm going to grab the corner of it. I'm going to create a mini version of it right next to it. Press Enter to lock it in. And now that is your mini-me version of this. And the way you can tell you did a nice job is how clean your selection is throughout this whole thing.